Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope lunches are delicious. I would like to start the next session by introducing the director of this venue, former Assemblywoman Catharine Baker. Former Assemblywoman Catharine Baker is the director of the University of California Student and Policy Center, the university's dynamic system-wide hub located just steps from the state capitol here in Sacramento. As director, Catharine leads the university's policy programming at the center, including high-profile speaker series, debates, conferences, and briefings that engage government officials, lawmakers, businesses, and civic leaders, as well as UC students and alumni on timely national and state policy issues. Director Baker holds a JD from UC Berkeley School of Law and a BA in political science from the University of Chicago. Thank you so much, Director Catharine, for having us today. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to have you here and welcome you to the center. Again, Catharine Baker, and I'm a full civilian now. I served for several years in the state assembly, which was great work to get to do. But one of the things I most enjoy is getting to visit with our government leaders who are helping shape policy and shape what our lives look like in California. And we are very honored to have Secretary Stewart Knox here today. He's Secretary of California's Labor and Workforce Development Agency. And before I let him use his microphone, I get to tell you something about him because I'm pretty impressed. First of all, I grew up on a cattle ranch. So I'm pretty impressed by that as well. He's had extensive experience for over 28 years in statewide workforce and economic development. Of course, he's been our secretary of the agency since 2022. Prior to that, he was Undersecretary of Labor and Workforce Development. And then he's also served in a variety of capacities that touch on the complexity of workforce and our economic development in California. But at the local level, at the county level, and at the state level, in rural, semi-rural, and urban and suburban parts of California. It is a great combination of experience. That includes with the Albright Community College System, with the California Employment Training Panel, the Health and Human Services Department for Nevada County, Director of Economic and Workforce Development for San Mateo County, also the Director of Northern Rural Training and Employment Consortium, as well as Executive Director of North Central Counties Consortium, and Director of Workforce with the City of Glendale. So I'm glad you're back up here. I'm sure you're not a Dodgers fan. I just want to make that right.
Well, actually, Dad was a Dodgers fan. Okay. Mom was a Giants fan. So that was
that's
fun.
A fun household.
Yeah.
Okay. Please welcome Secretary Knox. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I do want to just start by giving you an opportunity to share with us, because I know the labor agency is tracking workforce, tracking data, tracking what's going on in California. What would you identify are the foremost issues facing California workers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's not a day doesn't go by about, and I'm sure you'll all be shocked about this answer, is AI. And so one of the key components is what AI is going to do to the workforce and for the workforce in some ways, but really how we generally track and look at the dynamics between the effects from the employer side of the house and to what effects it's going to have on the workforce. Currently, we are tracking in multiple different ways. We're working with California Policy Lab and others to really think about where the job losses will occur and have already occurred. And so I think that's the key component of that. Secondary to that, I would also say in ag workforce, because coming from an ag community, I've always had a passion to think about how ag workers are affected by mechanization, but also by the way that they're treated as workers. And so I think there's a component of that we've also put a lot of money behind. Victoria's here from Agriculture Labor Relations Board, which is under the agency, and really be thoughtful about some of the work that we do with ag. And so that's the two components that I think we've really had high focus on. Opportunity Youth, what we call Opportunity Youth programs, are really specific around, and we've actually thought about the ages of youth up to age 28, young adults, in the workforce and trying to enter the workforce, what those skills are going to look like tomorrow for them with the use of AI. So we've also put quite a few dollars behind that work as well.
All right. Well, as a parent of a going to graduate, Aggie, and a recent graduate from Santa Barbara. And also someone from a background of professional services. So in another life, I'm a lawyer. The AI one is very important for everybody, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that. So let's say for our college students and our community college students and our recent graduates, what are you tracking and what are you seeing in trends in AI for how it's affecting their job opportunities in California? Again, selfish question because my kids are about to graduate and I have one that just did, but you mentioned that and you mentioned the young adults.
Yeah, what we're tracking so far is I think young adults are very nervous, as they should be probably to some level, around how AI is going to affect their job search in the future and what they should be actually skilling up to by the use of AI. So we've done quite a lot of work actually with our CSUs, some with our UCs, and some with our CSUs around, and obviously our community colleges, is the baseline of what AI really is. And so that we've done micro-credentialing work through our community college systems. We're currently working with the CSUs in developing a micro-credential for all of Californians. And so we're really being thoughtful about like, just what is it? What are the uses for that?
Okay, so they get a credential in understanding and being able to utilize AI.
Right, and
so,
best practices within.
Okay.
We've worked with San Diego State University quite a bit, actually. So San Diego's been kind of the forefront of this work and really being thoughtful about offering to 70% of all of their freshmen have to take an AI course. And so it's not just about the use on that, but it's also the ethics behind it. And as you can imagine, instructors are also very thoughtful about like how this is going to be utilized. And so also utilizing some of that information for the instructor side of the house so that they have a better understanding of the systems and where the uses could be best utilized. Because there's a fear between not only the job issue, but also getting caught using AI. And so I think that's an important factor that all of our CSUs, UC systems, and community colleges can have.
Yes, I can. All of our higher education brethren and sistren, we're pleased to work with. I know that UC was kind of at the forefront of principles for using AI, both in academia and just in general in a large workplace, and it changes so quickly.
Yes.
So part of that changes to different job sectors. Yep. So, for example, oil and gas workers have already seen some reduction in their jobs in California as we transition away from fossil fuels. How are you seeing the next sectors in California that will most be affected by displacement from AI?
Well, so we did a study just recently using California Policy Lab, and so it's a little wonky but complicated, but if you're applying for unemployment insurance, there's actually a drop-down screen that will tell you or ask the question of what industry sector you're in and occupation. So we were able to glean information from that just recently. We haven't released the report yet, but basically we're not seeing large swaths yet. I think yet is in the quotes part because I think times will change, but we're not seeing large swaths. Accounting obviously is one that we've seen some job losses from accountants, attorneys, job movement within attorneys fields, paralegals, some of those fields I think is what we're seeing first and foremost. So it's kind of that what we would call the white collar workforce. More,
interesting you're seeing that first.
That is first.
What a different trend.
Yeah.
So
right.
from prior disruptions.
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Which also is a little complex for us because we've typically always focused on underserved or underrepresented communities within our workforce system because that's usually where we see most of the dislocations first within the economic sectors. And so for us, this is kind of a swing to work with a white collar workforce that is going to have a need that we haven't seen in the past.
And you know, I will not profess to be an expert AI. I know I'm not. I know it can make my emails sound a little bit nicer. I mean, I do take advantage of that. But I also wonder if that will change over time. So I'm starting to think of how folks who are entering their career, or if they see that they might need to make a career change because AI is coming, where do you see the places to work that might be a little more insulated from AI displacement?
Yeah, I would say healthcare. I mean, anything that actually has to have a human touch, although healthcare is being affected as well, but it's mostly enabling healthcare workers. And I'm sure if any of you have been to your doctor lately, they ask the question, is it okay if I use AI to actually write my notes? I'm sure that's fine, whatever. But that's affecting them in a way to enable them to do their work in a different way. But the human touch area is always going to be a principal issue, I think, around the healthcare side of the house. So I think like healthcare is pretty insulated generally. I think anything politicians is probably pretty insulated.
Is that good? I'm not sure.
Right.
Don't look at me. I'm not a politician anymore. So yes.
Yeah. I look at Crystal, my communications person. I think, we're going to have maybe less communications folks in the future, but you're going to, Crystal's like, great, I'm going to lose my job. She's not going to lose her job. It's folks that around the area of how do we better enable them to do their work in a different way. And so I think from the state's perspective, what we're really trying to be thoughtful and working with employers is rather than thinking about displacement, how does it actually help your workforce do more? Yeah. Instead of adding the stress of losing a job, how do you get more production having AI as a use to?
And I swear we'll talk about something other than AI. But before we leave the topic, I do want to know just more about what your agency is doing in these different topics about displacement. Certainly there's tracking and data. You're doing some work with the California Policy Lab, which, by the way, is a UC family as well. They have offices here in the center that does real-time research for our state agencies. Free plug to them. But tell us more about what you're prioritizing within the agency in AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So early in the administration, when AI started to evolve fairly quickly, the governor, we were tasked with, come up with ways we can actually start to insulate the workforce in certain ways, and also what kind of training dollars we can put out to do that. So we quickly started working with our community college system. And so we pivoted to the community colleges population we work with generally a lot, and started to involve the instructor side of the house to learn from industry of like how quickly this is moving. So one was we worked with the chancellor's office, developed a strategy with I think 7 community colleges, some within the Bay Area. We actually went and visited to be able to learn from an industry, but also be able to teach about what the new uses of AI will be in the future as we move forward quickly. So that was one case where we started to move in that. Secondary, I brought up the CSU system. We've started working with them to develop the micro-credential. So it's like a basic baseline of ethics use, but also what's the basic uses of the system, and what's things to do and not do with that. So that's the secondary one that we started to work with. And then third, we've also started, I brought up working with white-collar workers versus blue-collar workers. Unique for our system, we have 45 local boards within the state of California that oversee our what we call America's Job Centers of California, so AJCCs. And so those folks, we started to say, you're going to have issues working with a workforce that we've never seen before in the offices. And so we've just put some money out to California Workforce Association, the nonprofit side of the house, to be able to start examining what are those skill differences that we're going to see coming through the door, and how do we start to evolve into a workforce that will serve everyone within the system.
Your agency is going to be busy because AI is going to keep changing. Yes. It's going to keep affecting so many sectors, so many age groups, some different geographies. So we could be having this conversation again next year. We'll have to sign up for that.
It'll be different.
So switching a little bit now, I'd like to talk about those who have alternative arrangements in the workplace, and what the agency is monitoring or doing to ensure their health and safety. Health and safety is a big part of our workforce and labor. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, similar. We do have funding that we put out every year. And so one of the key components we really started to think about, and I'm glad Victoria is here today from ALRB, is under COVID, one of the things that we put out, which was called the California Worker Outreach Programs, what we called CWOP, started in COVID era. It was really just informing folks through CBOs, to get vaccinated essentially, but also, other topic areas. What we've evolved that into in the last 4 years is really an outreach program to workers that have alternative work schedules and different things that happen within their lives, and being able to have money go out. I think we put out close to $75 million in the last 4 years to 90 different community-based organizations to be really thoughtful about bringing worker voice within the community, and also distributing information around what is their labor rights. What's the law really mean when it says this? Giving access through our CBO communities to all of Californians in a way that they maybe don't have access, or they don't have trust in government in ways that others may. This has also been instrumental in ICE operations to some level as well. It's just their rights as people in the state of California versus being seen as something else.
Yeah. And of course, this folks who have alternative arrangements, another challenge sometimes is just how to ensure they have economic security.
Yeah.
And so, what role does the agency play in that? Because there's, I imagine, a little bit of a limit. But what role do you play in the economic security for those workers?
Yeah, I love that. So in 2021, the governor asked Dee and I, basically, Dee Meyer's governor's Office of Business, to come up with a plan to actually think about a blueprint for California in terms of economic development and workforce development. So at that point, I actually was at Calbright. You brought up Calbright, and they brought me back into the ledge unit and to write the legislation. Abby worked with me, Ed's wife, worked with me on weekends, thanks Ed, to develop the strategy through legislation. We went through the legislative process. We started with $600 million. It later got down to $450 million. But basically, we were the entity that put out the $450 million. We divided the state up into 13 regions to really develop an economic blueprint for the state of California in a way that had never been done.
Was this the Regions Rise Together?
It started with Regions Rise
Okay,
Together.
got it.
Exactly.
Yes.
It started
Okay,
with
very
Regions
good.
Rise Together, and then later became what we call, well, the governor hated the name. It became Community Economic Resilience Fund. He hated the name. Yeah, it doesn't.
I'm not going to lie, it's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. Exactly. So now it is called Jobs First.
Yes.
That is the Jobs First initiative. And then tied to that, at the same time, same year, we funded, the funding came out for the Master Plan on Career Education. So we really started to look at what was the demand side going to be, what is employers' needs going to be, what is changing in the economy, AI, for example, and what skills will be necessary for the workforce for the future. So the Master Plan on Career Education was a $250 million initiative. Went to all 13 regions also, just like we had matched those up with the 13 regions, and developed those two plans together. So we have basically the blueprint for economic development, and we have the master plan on career education, and tying those two together.
So now that those blueprints and the master plan are out, what happens next?
Yeah.
Because sometimes reports and studies are released,
Yeah.
and then you don't hear about them again, and the needle doesn't move. So how is execution the focus? What do you anticipate will happen next?
Yeah, and with 8 months left. With this administration, we have 8 months. Actually, it's kind of what Dee and I both have talked about is like that's where the work really starts now. And so we've deployed now, we'll put out the last round of $45 million of the $450 million. So we put out most all the money will be out, all of it will be out through the end of the administration. And we've really tied this to how many jobs that will actually be put people into, which is kind of an indicator that the state usually doesn't really use very often when we're putting dollars out. And so we're looking at what's the jobs, but we're also looking at what's the quality of those jobs. And so do they have health care, benefit programs, things like that as well? What's the pay range? So we're starting to put all of those together. On the master plan side, I think what's really core is in driving this is the governor had 5 different things actually, or probably 20. You know the governor. He probably had 20 things about that, but there's 4 or 5 major components of it. One was credit for prior learning so that we could actually use people's credit, what they had gained in their workforce, to apply through a community college system. We started with veterans, and currently I believe we have 40,000, I'll look at Crystal, but I think it's around 40,000 veterans and spouses of veterans that we've used credit for prior learning to actually apply as they go into the community college system, which is really instrumental for them to get 6, 12, 15 units that they already now have into. The other component was dual enrollment. And so dual enrollment, we wanted to go from about 10% uptake in the California to about a 25% uptake in California. So basically students in high school could earn up to 18 to 22, 24 credits within high school as they go through into community college. So it's giving them step up. And so we're already hitting those marks in this administration to make that happen. And the other piece was Career Passport. So Career Passport is really a digital way to be able to say, I got these certifications, this X, Y, and Z, all in one passport per individual. So that person then can go from one place to another without, as we know how hard it is to get transcripts sometimes, that all of that credit then goes through to them as well. So those are some of the components of Master Plan.
And as you say, I mean, there's 8 months left in the administration.
Yeah.
These are major reports. That'll probably be something that folks focus on for what comes next in the new administration that will be coming down the road, whoever that may be. Okay, I'd like to talk about a little bit more on you've mentioned white collar.
Yep.
I'd like to talk about our trades and skilled workforce. There was an article over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal on how there's a people have gotten the message that four-year college and community college are great pathways to education and work, but so are trade skills. And yet both the community colleges and the trade schools are maxed out. There was a local union that took something like 600 applications for 85 spots. And, this is an area we've really been saying I was vice chair of higher education, so I'm throwing this in there. We've really been saying, like, this is another pathway to great careers and lifelong learning and skills development. People are taking them now, but the pipeline is very narrow. What is the agency seeing and possibly doing in that area with respect to our trade skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. So also, as you probably remember, the governor challenged the administration, us, to do 500,000 apprentices through up to 2029. He wanted 500,000 apprentices. So we're currently registered, and I always look at apprentices two things. One is what I call the big A, which is apprentices that are registered by a division of apprenticeship standards, also a mouthful, which is under us. And those are registered with the state of California. And then I have the little a, which is basically internships that are paid, they have to be paid, and work experiences that have to be paid. And so currently on track, we have 244,000 apprentices registered. We have over 674,000, I believe it is, in the little a component. So it's growing that pipeline. We also had a strategy in 2021, which is now almost all of that funding is out, which was Apprenticeship Innovation Fund, what we called AIF. That was a $240 million initiative to actually grow that pipeline. Because to your point, in the trades, it gets very restricted. And so what's the non-traditional side of the house? How do we grow that as well? Because recognizing that not everyone's going to go into the typical trades, but there's other ways we can grow apprenticeship. And so that leading really went to growing the other side of the house of apprenticeship.
Okay, well, abrupt change of topic. We're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. At least I think that's where this is coming from. So they're both with Medi-Cal, which of course is the state versions of Medicaid and CalFresh, and Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, so SNAP. These have had the federal requirements changed, and one of the changes is not only frequency of reapplying, but work requirements in order to get the benefits. How is the agency responding?
Yeah, so it's huge for both agencies, Health and Human Services, and so Health and Human Services really has the brunt of this, obviously, in terms of the population it's serving. On the workforce side, we're really developing a strategy. We looked at regions within the state of California with the highest use, essentially, of Medi-Cal. Broke it down to, and Abby's probably somewhere in the room. There she is. 7 counties is what we've broke it down to do pilots within. And so the state's been aggressive at getting philanthropy dollars, essentially, to be able to fund parts of that in addition to the work that needs to happen. But in what we're looking for, which goes back into the master plan and career education, is how do you start to bring these folks into our workforce development side of the house? And so, I'm old enough, a welfare to work program was during the Clinton administration, so it has very similar components of that.
Late 90s, I just want to point that out.
98, 99. And so it has similar outputs essentially that we will have to do through HR 1. And so that pilot will begin soon. So we're working really, really closely with Health and Human Services to meet that. It's about 50-60% of the populations within those 7 counties. And so if we can get it right in those counties, then we will obviously deploy throughout the rest. So it's really bringing folks in, because part of the work requirements participation is also going to be they can have education or training. And so if we can bring them into the training component and bring up quality of life that way through that.
So let me kind of try to understand that. So in 7 counties, you're doing a pilot project on how to communicate and educate. Tell me what is actually happening in the 7 counties.
Right. Yeah, it's a little complicated. So one, the systems, while some are in house, when I say systems, our AJCCs, America's Job Centers, those are separate in many of these counties from the Health and Human Services agencies. So one, it's bringing together those 2 entities to be able to do referrals back and forth between the system and also track within that. But it's also better assessments. So getting a better understanding of where the person is in life and how do we apply, basically these folks into a workforce development structure, getting them into the community college system, getting them into apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship training programs. How do we start to develop those strategies? So that's what the 7 counties are doing now.
Got it. So in a way, tell me if this is a way to distill it. It is helping identify, well, first of all, agencies at a local level working together. So the left hand, the right hand are talking to each other. And so that the individual can get some direction, some assistance on, okay, you got this requirement you need to meet. Here's different ways you can meet it.
Exactly.
And then tying them up with that.
tying
Okay.
it together.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just have to distill things
No,
down
you're
a
totally
little
right.
bit. So yeah. Okay. And with that, what do you see in the next 8 months are going to be your priorities as this administration is beginning to see its, I don't want to say sunset, but the end, and that your time in that place was, what are the top priorities that you're going to focus energy on?
Yeah, for us, the farm worker programs, I think I really want to instill in the systems so that the next administration sees the value of what we've done with the farm worker communities, ALRB, others. We've developed such great training between the 4 entities that basically oversee a lot of the farm worker populations. And so I think really having funding secured, which we have a fund within the labor agency that funds this. And so making sure that's secured, I think for the next administration, they continue that work. I think that would be a priority. Number 2 is really around, we talked about the master plan and career education. I think really making sure that that's embedded within the work for the next administration, that they see the value. We see the value, obviously, in this administration for the students and the outputs for that. And then on the economic development strategy, I think that wrap up of the 13 is how do you continue to fund economic development differently? Because part of the thing I didn't really bring up was it was bringing everybody to the community, from the communities talking about economic development. It wasn't just the economic developers in a room bringing in big business and then building a building and bringing workers. Okay. It was really being thoughtful about how it's done and bringing community to that. So
one of the things I heard, I do want to go back actually to in the 3 minutes we have left, to the agricultural work layers. But one of the things I heard is that hoping that the next administration, whoever's and whatever it looks like, will buy in. The flip side of that is that the great work, they may not. Like, it's something that can be, if it's not legislatively in there, there could be a complete change. Okay, good to know. Okay. And then with our agricultural workers, I don't know if this is something that the labor agency is doing, but how are you responding to some of the disruption and confusion in the workforce? Because so much of our agricultural workforce is immigrants.
Yeah, so I brought it up briefly. I didn't call out its name, but it's
this is your chance to dive in.
Yeah, it's the Rural Strategic Engagement Program, which is RCEP. I'm looking at Victoria behind me, which leads a lot of the work from ALRB. Really brought together ALRB, DIR, the Labor Commissioner's Office, Cal OSHA, and of our Workforce Services branch, we have what is the Migrant Office Advocate. So one of the things in 2022, I think it was 2022, is there was the shootings in San Mateo County. And I had to call all 4 different department heads to get information of what have you done, what have you done, what have we done. Instead of that, in the future, I said, we need to bring all of these 4 departments, they're all under labor agency, together and actually have trainings together, develop strategies of outreach, and develop the way we do this better in the future to serve
Communicate with one another?
Communicate with one another.
Okay.
If you see a child that looks like they're under the age of 14 working in the fields, what do you do? Right? The Labor Commissioner's Office knows what to do. ALRB probably knows what to do, but others may not. Cal OSHA may just go, that's not really my role, right? If it's not a safety issue that the person's there, but may not actually know what to recognize on that. So just recently, actually out at UC Davis, we had a training on what do you do if you see a child that looks underage?
Okay.
Who do you contact? What are the actions you can take place? And so now they have referral forms back and forth between the 4 disparate entities on how to actually identify what's happening in the workplace. Or if you see a safety concern issue, who do you call? And you're not Cal OSHA,
Yeah, well, if people don't know, there's paralysis. There's no communication. Right. So it is good to see that there is this idea about not only communicating with our 13 regions and our 7 counties and the people who are hopefully able to get support, but within agencies. So with that, any closing remarks that you want to leave with us? No. Now that I'm so mindful of these 8 months, the clock is ticking. Yeah. But for our audience here, any closing remarks?
No, just thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate everybody's time and just the great work that all of you do. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for spending time with us. This is a very busy time, so we're grateful. Thank you.